Hi guys. It's Sunday, and so naturally I'm creating torture for you. Today we're talking about how to write an introductory paragraph for your ACT or persuasive essay. The ACT written essay is persuasive, and all persuasive essays can be structured according to this model. You're going to have to do specific things to get an A on this assignment, and you're going to be doing this several times this year, each time using the same information. So it's nice for you to have a video recording to help you remember some of these rules. Freshmen, you're doing the same exact thing as the juniors. You'll have to have all of the same parts. You'll be graded according to the same rubric. Obviously, the standard to which you will be graded is going to be not as strict as what the juniors are doing, but you should still be able to do all of the parts and make sure that you're starting to build your understanding of the ACT written prompt as well. All right, take out your introduction paragraph handout. Let's start going over some of the parts of the essay. First of all, this is going to be a 5 or 6 paragraph essay at the most. Exactly 5 or 6 paragraphs. You need to indent every paragraph of your essay. You should also be writing this in Times New Roman, size 12, double-spaced font, which is exactly what I'll have you do for every paper that you write in this class. The question that you're answering has been the topic of discussion for several weeks in our class. What should be done with Confederate monuments? You've seen a variety of stances and perspectives on this question, but by no means have read all of the arguments in this discussion. So in weeks to come, after we get done writing our introduction, we will read several more arguments. At this point, though, you should know where you're going to argue from. Even if you don't have all of the information, you know the basic idea of what your stance is going to be, and then you can continue collecting evidence to help you support your position. So you can write your introduction just having an idea of where you're going to argue from. The first thing that you write is called the hook. This is how you get your audience's attention. It's a story that you tell, an anecdote. Freshmen, you know what that word means. Juniors, you should remember from freshman vocabulary that an anecdote is a short story you tell to help prove a point. And that story needs to be plausible. It doesn't necessarily have to be true, but it has to be a hypothetical situation that could be true. So it cannot be fantastical or an imaginary world that isn't something that could possibly happen. You are trying to use pathos, that is an emotional appeal, to tell how a specific person experiences the controversial issue that you're writing about. So remember Mayor Landrieu's speech where he was explaining why he thought it was the good thing to do to remove Confederate monuments from New Orleans. He told the story of a 5th grade girl who was African American and came home and asked her parents why there was a statue of Robert E. Lee that she had to walk by every day as she went to school. What did that statue mean? And he asked his audience, could you, if you were her parents, really tell her in good faith that that statue is there to inspire her? And a lot of you remembered that as being the quintessential image or argument of that entire speech. Even though he had brought up many other issues, that was the one that you remembered. So this is your place to try to get something to stick with your reader. So if you're going to tell an anecdote, then you need to make sure that whatever images you're creating or emotions you're trying to inspire in your listener go along and are relevant to the argument you're trying to make. So you're trying to use that image, that example, that story, that statistic, that quotation to get your reader to envision an image that tells your side of the story. Again, the purpose of a hook is to capture your reader's attention. All right, now you're done with your hook. You're going right into giving the background information. Describe the issue that you're discussing and why it's controversial. Explain how this discussion started and why people are concerned about this issue. Basically, tell what you know about the topic. You're a journalist, you're doing the who, what, when, where, why, and how. If you're going to talk about Confederate monuments, you could say this conversation has been going on for many years, but started to really reach a national debate after Dylan Roof went into a church in South Carolina wearing a Confederate flag and shot 9 black people. He had written a manifesto of white supremacy, and this was the time period when many mayors and senators, both Republican and Democrat, started to take down Confederate flags from state buildings, and this led into the Confederate memorial conversation. That's kind of really is where it started. So you would want to use dates, use specific events to explain why you're even talking about this. And you have to remember, your reader doesn't know that you had an assignment in your English class to write this essay. They're just here reading this paper and they don't know anything about it. And you don't know how long from now this person could be reading your paper. So you really have to situate them. You give them context by giving them that background information. The next thing that you have, and you can do each one of these in one single sentence, is give a brief understanding to your reader of what the 2 oppositional ways of seeing this issue are. So you're going to give them one sentence that tells, here's what the advocates of this issue think, here's what the people who are in favor of this say, and here's the basic, most fundamental but strongest perspective that those who are opposed would give. And you can do that by starting those sentences with something like this. Some people think Confederate monuments should be removed from public spaces because they are offensive and send a intimidating message to minority people, to suggest that what those Confederate monuments stood for during the Confederacy are ideals that are still alive in America today, while others contend that the statues don't so much revere the values of the Confederacy, but simply remember that past and therefore should stay in those public spaces. You're just going to give a basic overview of the main reason or way that people find themselves conflicted in this issue. All right, now we're to the thesis statement. The thesis statement is your final position on this, what you're going to be arguing throughout the rest of the paper. You do have to present the thesis statement in the last sentence of the introductory paragraph. It should be one sentence. So you have to get at exactly what your nuanced position is. Nowhere in this paper should you really be using the word I or any variant of it like my, myself. Or should you be using the second person you, as in you, yourself. Don't address the reader as you. A lot of people do that. They start off writing this paper. Have you ever wondered blah, 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 blah? Don't do that. That is 4th grade writing. You are so much smarter than that. We don't want to do that. So your thesis statement's going to be written as a complex sentence. Juniors, you know what that is. Freshmen, I'm going to help you with that. So if you don't know what that is, you will by the end of this presentation. The thesis should be where you stand, the exact nuanced position you take. It has to be an arguable statement. That means it's an opinion that you're going to argue. It can't be, for instance, there are 1,500 Confederate monuments in existence in the U.S. in public spaces right now. That's a fact. your thesis statement has to be what you're going to argue. And you can't be in the middle. You have to pick a side. You can have a nuanced position, but you can't say, I both agree and disagree that Confederate monuments should stay and be removed. That's nonsense. You have to take a position. So make sure that it's clear that you either swing more towards supporting or opposing the idea that you're arguing. Here are the two sentences that I would like you to use for your complex sentence structure. Though blank, comma, it is clear, blank, period. Though Confederate monuments are highly contested in American society, comma, it is clear that they are one way that Americans remember their past to ensure that they don't repeat it. Therefore, those monuments should remain. That's one possible thesis statement. It's clear in that sentence that you're in favor of keeping Confederate monuments in public spaces. Another way you could do it, and I'm going to go ahead and take the reverse position with this one, while blank, comma, it is important to remember blank, period. While Confederate monuments might tell a version of American history, it is important to remember that for many minorities especially, that history is problematic and complex, and those monuments are a reminder of values that Americans should no longer esteem or revere. Therefore, Confederate monuments should be removed from public spaces. You're very nuanced with that type of sentence. So that last sentence is where you are telling your reader, that's their signal, this is what the rest of my paper is going to defend. Let's take just a second, and I want you to switch to a different handout. This handout is up at the top. It says sample prompt. Go ahead and look at that now. It's about a half page. It says trigger warnings at the top. Let's read that. This is an actual ACT prompt. Remember, ACT prompts are always going to be controversial issues. That's another reason why we need to learn how to talk about controversial issues. Let's read this. At colleges and some high schools, students have requested trigger warnings. Notifications that material they've been assigned to see or read may be upsetting in some way and may trigger grievous emotional reactions. Considerable controversy has developed about trigger warnings both on campuses and in the media. Those who defend them claim that students should not be assigned material that unsettles or distresses them. Victims of rape or child abuse, for example, should not be forced to read about such materials in literary works. Opponents, on the other hand, argue that trigger warnings are a dangerous form of censorship and an affront to academic freedom. Here are 3 perspectives that people have taken on this issue. 1. Studying the humanities involves a vast array of things of a disturbing nature. That's what getting an education means, especially a college education. It's also learning about real life. Perspective 2. Demands for trigger warnings indicate that many current students are pampered, sheltered, and immature. Coddling them like babies is harmful and demeaning. Perspective 3. Grim topics such as war, torture, and suicide can dredge up memories of traumatic experiences and cause students to feel unsafe and unable to cope. Perspective 1 and Perspective 2 are opposed to trigger warnings. Perspective 3 says that we should have them. Here's what you have to do. Write a well-organized essay that asserts the 3 perspectives on the use of trigger warnings in educational settings. Be sure that your essay analyzes and evaluates the 3 perspectives, explains and supports your own perspective on the issue, and discusses the similarities and or differences between your perspective and those stated above. Okay, so you don't have to do that, but I did give you a model paragraph that has all of the things that I want you to have in your persuasive essay introduction, and I've shared that on the back of one of the papers that you should have. It's just a paragraph that does all the things. So what are those 4 things? 1, you'd use an anecdote or some kind of interesting, thought-provoking statement to get your reader's attention and direct them to the conversation that you're about to have. 2, you fill them with background information on the topic. What's the issue? Where did the controversy start? 3 is to state the main ways that advocates and opponents see the issue. Just 2 sentences at the most to explain to them, here's what those people who are in favor of blank believe. This is the main argument that those who are opposed have. And then finally, a complex sentence thesis statement. Let's read the example. Education is intended to challenge ideas, to get students to question normalized ways of thinking, to dissect assumptions, to dig deep into history, to consider other ways of thinking, and to engage in active debates to discover truth. This occurs at both the high school and college level. The process of learning can be frustrating at times, can be painful, and can require students to admit their own shortcomings as thinkers and citizens. The tradition of liberal arts education is one of fostering open-mindedness. At some colleges and high school, trigger warnings in syllabi and course descriptions have been used to notify students that some of the content of certain courses may cause strong emotional reactions, may be controversial, or may contain illicit or violent content. The controversy over such warnings has caused some advocates to suggest that students could opt out of taking courses or opt out of reading content that might provoke such negative emotional reactions. Opponents believe these warnings are a dangerous form of censorship and limit academic freedom. While trigger warnings should be used to warn students of graphic, potentially controversial and disturbing content, students and teachers should not avoid controversial topics, nor should they be able to opt out of engaging in such content. All right, that's the entire paragraph. And if you break this down, you can see those 4 parts in here. I'm going to highlight them so you can see them. This right here, this sentence about what the purpose of education is trying to get my readers' attention, trying to get them thinking about what education is supposed to be. And that's a general statement that's going to lead into how the controversy surrounding trigger warnings affects that educational philosophy. Then, from here to here, this is my background information. I've defined what trigger warnings are. I've given a basic idea of when they might be used. So I've entered the conversation, and now my reader knows or has an idea of what is at stake. Then I have one complex sentence. It's there's a semicolon, but there are 2 independent clauses here to tell you what those who agree, advocate for trigger warnings mainly argue, and what those who are opposed to trigger warnings argue. It's just the most basic overview. In my body paragraphs, I'll get more into what the arguments for and against are. And then the last sentence is a complex sentence. While some people think this, or while this is true, I'm kind of conceding something, I then clarify my position. I say trigger warnings should be used in classes, but I don't believe that should prevent teachers from having controversial discussions in class, and I don't think it should be an excuse for students to opt out of doing assignments. So I've created a very nuanced, that is specific and complex way of thinking about the topic. That's what you want to do with yours. Try not to think in overly simplistic terms. You are going to be graded on the complexity of your thinking, both on the ACT and for this particular assignment. All right, so using that as an example, on the side, I've tried to give you some of those warnings about things that you should be aiming for and things that you want to avoid. For instance, don't use the phrase I believe or I think anywhere in your essay because it minimizes the objectivity and force of your argument, etc. Read down those comments this on the side of the page so you have all that information. I'm going to expect that anything I give you in class that you're going to actually look at it and take notes over it, and then you're able to apply those rules to your own writing. This entire assignment is going to be due Monday, so you have to have an introduction done on Monday, and you have to have all 4 parts. You have to have a hook, you have to give background information, you have to restate the main stance of those who agree with you, and then give the basic argument of the opposition, and you have to have a complex sentence thesis statement to show what argument you're going to take all over the Confederate Monuments question. So that's a lot of information, but I've tried to break it down so that if you do all of these things, you're going to have an A+, and you're going to do very well on the ACT as well. And so we're going to practice this format several times. You basically need to memorize this because this is what your introduction needs to look like whenever you write any type of essay for this class. And all of the essays you write for this class are going to be persuasive in some way. So if you have any questions, I'll be in class tomorrow. You can ask questions then. I would highlight all of the different parts, and then I would just start writing those out one step at a time for my own essay until you have a really nice rough draft of an introduction. On Monday, you'll turn it in at the start of class, and you'll be given your first writing assignment grade, which is 30% of your grade, and it must have all of those parts. So if there's something you don't understand that we're discussing today, you need to make sure you come ask tomorrow. All right, now the exciting part, you get to start writing. Good luck, and I hope you have fun with this question. Talk to you later.